In this video we'll talk about the multi-user editing features when you're editing data in a grid component. So let's launch this grid that we've been using in the previous videos in Firefox. And what I'm going to do is copy this URL, and so I now have this grid open in two different tab panes so that I can simulate a multi-user environment. So imagine that this is user 1 who might be editing this grid in London, and this is user number 2 who's in Paris and he's editing the same grid. So here's user number 1, and he goes and he changes this first record from Michael to John, and he commits the data. Now user number 2 is looking at this record, and he has not yet begun to edit, and he goes here and he starts changing this from alpha to beta. And notice that as soon as he starts typing, the Ajax callback happens and refreshes the data in the grid, so that the value in first name got updated to John, so that the user now is editing the most current version of the data. And that's going to minimize the chance of any type of write conflict because you're editing the current version of the data. So he goes ahead now and submits the data. And now if we go back to user number 1 over here, if he goes and starts to edit this field over here and he types in Boston, as soon as he types the B in Boston, the callback happens and the value in the company field is edited and changed to the current value. So he types in his Boston and submits. So in this example, basically both users start and complete their commits without running into any type of conflicts. But next we'll show what happens if a write conflict occurs because one user starts editing before another user, but after this first user starts editing, another user starts editing and finishes his commit before the first user does his commit. So let's go now to user number 1, and user number 1 is going to start editing, and he's going to go back and change that to alpha. Now he has not yet committed his data. So now he has user number 2, and he goes here and he changes the company from beta, and he goes here and he goes and he types it to software developers, and he types in Cambridge, and he's not going to have any problem committing because user number 1 has not committed his record yet. So he goes ahead now and he does a submit, and he has no problem with his submit. So now user number 1 over here continues, and he continues to make more edits, and he changes this to Smith, and now he tries to commit, and he gets a commit error telling him that basically the value in the company field that when he began editing was beta, but the value in the field now is software developers, so he cannot commit his record because there is a write conflict. So this shows how a web database application can have all of the same write conflict checking that you would expect to see in a desktop application, but very rarely see in web applications.